So 2 days ago, there's a new Dota 2 update, and this is really exciting. Obviously because I'm a Dota 2 player, right? No, I'm just kidding. Haha, I got you. So when Source 2 games update, like CS2 or like Deadlock or Dota 2, sometimes they will pull in changes from the latest underlying source engine code that all Source 2 games rely on and are built on. So what I'm actually interested in this Dota 2 update for is because the thing I just said happened. It pushed a newer version of the base Source 2 engine, which can sometimes have interesting info and leaks. Because that base Source 2 engine is what every Valve Source 2 project works off of, right? So if like a secret Valve project, had to change some stuff in the Source 2 base engine, then this Dota 2 update would pull that and we can get like a glimpse of what's going on secretly behind the scenes, right? So now if we get to the real shit, if we pull up the Source 2 Dota tracker, this is not Valve, by the way, this is like a third-party thing, but it checks for what's new and what's changed since like previous updates, right? They track how each game file has changed. And so let's start with the easy one first. If we go down to asset types, something very interesting has shown up. Oh my god, is that our GOAT? Codename TF is back? It's still alive? They're still working on it? So one bit of nuance I should point out is that all of this happened somewhere in the span of the 3 months since we have last seen a Source 2 game expose that, underlying like engine file and like, something changed and blah, blah, blah. You get what I'm trying to say? So like this addition of the TF codename could have happened, like anytime in the last 3 months. But what's interesting is that if you look at where this is added to, right? This is saying limit to mods, right? It's saying like a composite material kit and it's in asset types common. So this is like a Source 2 text file or like a data file that stores information about asset types, right? So like types of game files that you put into like a Source 2 video game, right? And then this is for the composite material kit. And it's saying this composite material kit, we only want to use it in CSGO LV, which I think stands for low violence, which I think is the Chinese version of Counter-Strike. And then recently they added TF. So this composite material kit can also be used in this mysterious TF game. So what the hell is a composite material kit? What are they doing with this, right? So we see here that this composite material kit, the file extension is vcompmat. So we can look this up and see what that is. If we go consult the Deadlock modding guide, right, and we check on what vcompmat is, oh, interesting. It's the composite material asset used by CS2 for weapon skins. And if we don't trust that, then we gotta at least trust Xpaul, right? The Steam DB guy. And he also agrees. It's a composite material kit for CS2 weapon skins. What actually is in the vcompmat? Like, what are they actually doing? So let's open up the CS2 game files and let's go check for a vcompmat. Oh, wow. There's a lot of them. And basically, these are all of the skins in CS2. This is a lot of files. I try to look at them and see. I genuinely think basically these are all weapon skins. There might be one or two like edge cases where it's used for not weapon skins, but I don't know if that's like the case. Someone would have to want to like dig through all of these and like check all of them to be sure. But we can take a deeper look. There's a skin that's like a good example I can show you. So AK-47 Crane Flight. This is the vcompmat for this skin. So we look at what is actually in here, right? This composite material file. It defines a bunch of interesting information that the game wants to know. So how it does its wear and tear, how it does its like texture rotation, how it does its like texture offsets and whatever. Here you have like the material that's defined that tells the game where to find the actual texture for this gun skin, right? So we go and look up the file that it references. Here's the Crane Flight texture. And then the part where it's like a composite material is that it also defines a bunch of other stuff as well in it, right? So there's normal maps. The one that will be easy to show you is this metal material. So you open that up and you compare how it looks compared to like the texture. You can see how it only highlights the shiny bits of the gun. So you can see in the video game, right, you can see how like not all bits of the gun are shiny, right? It's only like some very specific bits are shiny, but then some of them aren't. So this is what This is what this vcompmat extension is for. It's used in CSGO to define a weapon skin and all of the associated information that needs to go with it. That's what it's for. And if we go and check on the Dota 2 files, if I try to find and search for vcompmat, it's not there. And if we also check on the deadlock files, it's also not here. So what the third-party modders have claimed is true and it all checks out. It is a file format basically just used for CS for their skins. So what I've told you is basically all of the hard facts, right? So if we extrapolate a little bit, maybe this is Valve messing with Team Fortress skins, maybe, in like their Source 2 version of TF2, right? And for that, I have an extra bit of evidence for you to consider. Let me open up TF2's textures, and I need to search for something called Paint Kit. So in the TF2 textures, there's an icon called Paint Kit Bundle Large. Interesting. And there's 2, and there's number 3. Okay, cool. This is just like the icon for like the war paints, right? Why does this matter? So this is interesting because in CS2, hold up a second, they also call them paint kits. So in CS and in TF2, CS skins are called paint kits. Team Fortress 2 war paints are also called paint kits. Interesting. You can also see this is what they called weapon case paint kits, war paints. Interesting. So possibly what's happening is that if codename TF is Team Fortress and they didn't just like hijack this material to use for something else, which is kind of unlikely, I feel like, because if you look at, you know, like this modding resource, Source 2 has so many file types. Like, I don't really know why you also wouldn't just make a new one and why you have to hijack it. And also, honestly, hijacking it is just confusing and weird, right? If you really needed to do something similar to vcompmat, but then use it for a different purpose, then you would just fork it and make it like a different file format, right? It doesn't really make sense to, you know, like take something that already exists and then make it more confusing and weird. But so the breadcrumbs are there for you to interpret as you wish. Possibly they've been working on how they deal with putting Team Fortress 2's weapon reskins into a possible Team Fortress Source 2, however that may be. Okay, second thing that is interesting, and this one I have to emphasize like 10 different times that there's a lot of guesswork in this, so take it with a grain of salt, but this is also pretty interesting. If we go back to the GitHub files, we scroll down to the resource compiler, there's a very interesting mention, and it is for models effects cap point hologram. Now, why is this interesting? It's because if we open up the Team Fortress 2 files and we go to models, right? We go to effects, cap point hologram. Oh my god. And let me just like, I'll load this in a model viewer so there's no question what it is. So if we load this, there it is. There's our goat, the centerpiece of a vast majority of TF2 maps, the little spinny boy. So why is this being referenced? What could this possibly be for? What is this doing here? Why is this in like a source 2 file? So I originally thought and speculated for a bit was that, oh, it's a placeholder. Oh, they're using it as like a hammer. Maybe not in the game itself. It could be for hammer. It could be for like a visual representation of a capture point as like, you know, oh, it's here. You can see what this is for, right? Or you can, you know, like an entity icon, right? Like a placeholder. That would make some sense, but that's not true because the Source 2 engine does not support the Source 1 model format. You can see here actually, there's a VMDL file format, and that's what Source 2 uses. As far as I know, this is where I have to disclaim that I didn't get a chance to do as much research as I wanted to. Everyone I spoke to said that it's not just that they don't use .mdl files, it's that you straight up can't use .mdl files in the Source 2 engine. Like, it's not supported. You have to convert it. So this rules out this cap point hologram being used in a game of some kind in Source 2. I think it also rules out it being used in Hammer, as even as like a placeholder. Now, you could say that they created support for .mdl files, and you can also end your speculation there. That's also possible, but it seems kind of unlikely. So I try to dig deeper into it, and here's what I think it's maybe used for. I'm using as many words that allude to uncertainty as I can. Because this is a lot of like guessing and like inferencing, but you know, interesting if you want to think about it. So this cap point hologram doesn't seem like it's used for any kind of like hammer or in-game thing. So what is it for? So if we dig deeper into where it appears, resource compiler. Interesting. Okay, so I think this is what the cap point hologram is used for. It is used in a comparison function that takes in 2 bits of text and it says, okay, does this text equal this, right? But how does this even come into play, right? So this is what the function does. But you'll notice that our funny bit of cap point hologram text, whatever, is still not involved. How is that relevant? Well, but if text1 lie and say it does equal. So this is how our funny bit of text comes into play. For whatever reason, this comparison function, like this is pretty understandable and incredibly standard. The comparison, it says if this equals this, right? But for whatever reason, there's an extra bit that says, okay, but also if text1 is this exact hologram path thing, then we lie and we say, yes, actually it is equal. Now this is very curious. Why would you want to do this? What's the point of lying and basically breaking your comparison function? Like, what are you even doing this for? This makes no sense, right? All right, so this is the truth zone. This is what I'm like, I would be surprised if this turned out to be wrong because I did consult a few other people as well. And this seems to be what's happening. What you have to understand is that we are looking at assembly. We're going into DLL files and like executables and trying to see what they're doing and like guessing what's happening from that. You know, we're not looking at like code and it's hard to say for certain like what's happening. When you open this up, this is what it looks like. It's a lot of fucking crazy shit and it's you know, assembly and disassembly and blah blah blah. It's complicated. It's very complicated to look at. Very few people can even very confidently look at it and draw conclusions and understand what's going on and whatever. So there's a lot of like mystery and uncertainty around this, okay? Okay, what is all of this for, right? So I tried to look into what's going on. So I think this is what happens. And so let me explain what this middle part is first. What is an entity key value? So allow me to boot up Hammer. In the source engine, they have a way of organizing information that they like, right? If we spawn a prop dynamic and we set the model to, let's say like the sniper fence, right? Here's what entity key values mean. This is the entity, this is the key, and this is the value. Actually, it says it here, key value. So the value is, oh, what model is this prop dynamic supposed to be? And the key is like what information that I'm storing. So that's what it is. If we go back to our beautiful MS Paint drawing, there's a function within this resource compiler that handles all of the legwork with reading entity key values, reading information from objects. It's called from code that's associated with compiling a map, I think. So with all that said, right, this is, I have to emphasize, this could be wrong. We're looking at assembly, we're guessing, etc., etc. But I think what might be happening is that in the map compiling code, it calls the thing that looks at objects and it gets information from it. And then from that, for whatever reason, there is a function that compares the information it got from that to something else. Now, this is still weird because why? What are you comparing? Like, you're reading the information, you're getting information from the object. Why do you need to compare it, and what are you possibly comparing it for? Here's what I think is happening. What seems like it might be the case is that when Valve updates their map compiler, they want to have a way to check if they fucked up, right? Let's say they go and change a bunch of code about how entities are read, or like they change how an entity functions, and they have a new version of the compiler. They want to make sure that they didn't do anything wrong and break anything that they shouldn't. So what I think might happen is that they compile a map and they have it compiled under the new code and then the old code. And then this is where I think the comparison happens. They check if the old and the new match. And if they match or don't, then, you know, that's something like the Valve developer can go and check on. But this comparison function needs you to like deliberately go and activate it. You need to go and like put something into it and say it should, you know, like compare things for it to like do anything meaningful. So that's why it feels like it's like a debug thing. Like this is mainly used for checking if the code that we changed like fucked anything up terribly or if we're chill, you know? And so what does that all mean? If I try to synthesize all of this into some sort of theory, what I think might be happening is that maybe this means they have been doing work getting Source 2 to compile Source 2 TF2 maps. And they also updated how they handle the control point entity. So they added an exemption to make their debugging tool not throw errors about it, which is why we see the hologram reference. Like they're converting source 1 entities into source 2, and they're checking if everything's okay, if anything like messed up, or if they like interpreted things wrong or whatever. And the hologram is relevant here as well, because you might think, oh, it's just like a hologram, like who cares, right? It's probably just like any old prop, and it doesn't matter, right? Here's where it gets interesting. In Team Fortress Source 1, if we go check on the team control points, this entity is interesting because, wait a second, in the actual entity itself, they straight up embed the capture point hologram model path. And this is literally exactly what we saw in the GitHub diff in resource compiler. It's literally all here. Item model 1, 2, key value, it's all here. It literally references it. So if you really want to jump a few hoops, right? If we try to, you know, like do a little bit of interpreting, a bit of speculating here, you could conclude that they're doing something with TF2 maps and entities, and they're maybe converting from source 1 to source 2. They're making sure everything's okay. Or, you know, they're doing things to update like how their compiler works with entities and stuff like that. Like maybe this could be work that they're doing to create a tool that automatically converts source 1 maps into source 2 with a lot more other stuff on top of it, right? Just like automatically fixing a lot more entity jank and whatever, so they don't have to do it manually. And so that's why you would want a before and after check to make sure you didn't fuck everything up, because you're doing a lot more than just like direct translations. You're fixing up more jank and catching weird source 1 stuff. And this cap hologram thing, you know, maybe they exempted this because they already converted this to V model, or they already have a thing in their code to automatically translate this direct hard-coded reference to the cap point model to whatever it's supposed to be in source 2, and that's why you would ignore it, right? That's why you would say, okay, comparison tool, stop telling me about this because we have something for this, you know? We already got this sorted. It's gonna be a different path. It's gonna reference a different model, and that's okay. This is what it might be, and I don't know how many more ways I can say it. Please consult the graph. Danger zone. This is me guessing what might be happening, but it's so hard to say because it's assembly and all this other stuff. And you know, very likely when this goes out and more people see it, there'll be some ultra giga nerd who decides to dig even deeper, and some of this turns out to be wrong, or like, you know, some of the inferences I've made about what function does and whatever could be wrong. You know, maybe it's not map compiling code, maybe it's something else, right? But it's hard to say. It's speculation, but it's interesting, and you can think about it, how much it is real or not, and etc. Okay, here's one last interesting thing about this compare function. This cap point hologram is not the only guy in here for some reason. He has a companion, Materials Dev Fog of War Cloud 1 VTEX. So I did find out what this is. We have to dive back into source 2 viewer, and unfortunately we have to open the Dota files. I think it's in here. If we go to materials, developer, cloud 1, here's what I was referencing. So I don't know enough about Dota to say anything meaningful about this. I did try to see if I can investigate this. I tried to open up the map that they use in the game. I did try to see if there's anything I could really understand, but I have no clue what this is for. But it's interesting that there is something else in that like exception zone along with cap point hologram. Maybe at some point, the Dota 2 devs had to do a bunch of entity like adjustment stuff, and they were changing how the clouds work in Dota 2. I don't know. But VTEX is a source 2 format. In source 1 they use VTF. So it's some sort of thing that happened like after source 2 at some point. So something interesting to think about. And I think that's all I have to say about it. I cannot say anything more beyond that. I have no clue what happens in Dota 2. But anyways, so that is your latest in Codename TF. These new bits of breadcrumbs are interesting on top of the breadcrumbs we have also had last time. If you remember, last time there was interesting things to talk about with Codename TF. There was a Funk Respawn Room entity that showed up, and that's a TF2 exclusive thing. Other Valve games have functions and entities that perform a similar function, but they're not called that. Funk Respawn Room is a TF2 only thing, and that showed up last time we talked about Codename TF. But of course, I have to say, it's always possible. This is all nothing. It's always possible that all of these crumbs are coincidences, and They're just making a new game that uses Team Fortress placeholders, for example. Or maybe they want to make like a TF2 spiritual successor, and that's why they're pulling in so much like Team Fortress stuff, right? Like, who really knows? But in the end, I hope this was interesting to see, and I hope we get a new Team Fortress Source 2 or something like that. Who knows? That's it. Hope you had fun. Okay, goodbye.